Mikey P, Mike Probozzi in the Money Media YouTube channel. Derby preps for this weekend. And these are the big ones here. 100-point Derby preps. And probably the biggest one as far as intrigue with several horses that could vie for favoritism in the Kentucky Derby, in the Santa Anita Derby this weekend. And I have ITM analyst and certainly handicapper extraordinaire for all over the country, Nick Tammaro, with me to break down these Derby preps this weekend. Nick, Santa Anita Derby looks like the heavies.
It does, yeah. And of course, we've seen this race yield a number of Kentucky Derby winners over the years, and there's been a lot of power on the West Coast for the Kentucky Derby. I don't think this year is really any different, and in many ways, all the power is out there up to this point. So it's going to be very intriguing to see journalism run back, see how Citizen Bull stacks up against him, and where they all end up afterwards.
Well, 5 horses lining up for Saturday for this Grade 1 Santa Anita Derby. So we're going to go through all the horses, and the likely favorite draws the rail in journalism. Now, that 108 buyer last time in the San Felipe really sticks out for the 3-year-olds overall, not just for this race. And he has the points now. He should be in the gate. Nick, do you think that he takes another step forward? He really doesn't even have to necessarily to win, but he could certainly stamp himself the favorite for the Derby now.
Yeah, I mean, it's what it boils down to, right? If you're his connections, it's like, do you really want to go in? Do you want to use him completely in here to go in as the favorite, or are you looking for just another way to get yourself advanced forward? And, I never would say that people enter a horse because they're comfortable with losing, but this is a situation where I would imagine the instructions to Umberto Rispoli are going to be somewhere along the lines of like, get him into a comfortable spot, move him outside so he can make his move. And if you can't get there, don't use him up to try, right? Settle for second, settle for third, if that's what it means, because we're in the gate already. We've got a major contender no matter what. And winning this race really doesn't, other than it being a Grade 1, which obviously it's meaningful to win a Grade 1. There are bigger objectives for journalism down the line. It's a little bit like the situation with Sovereignty a week ago. It was one of those where you want to, if he's your horse, you want to see him run well, but you also don't want him gutted for the objective that's 4 weeks down the line.
Yeah, and there was an announcement this past week that the journalism will stand at Coolmore already. So, got the stud deal in place. I will say, though, I thought he got a good ride last time, but it seemed to me that he sort of did that on his own. He took such a step forward in there. He really had no business winning and tracking down Barnes and was able to do that. So I think that's why everybody thinks that he is the one. The fact that he's improved as a 3-year-old now, he can do it a lot of different ways. He can be close. He can maybe sit back. Pace doesn't really matter necessarily for him. So there's just so many positives with this horse that the distance shouldn't be an issue. There's so many things to like about him. I wonder if he does maybe take a step back here, what that really says. Maybe, do you think that there's any question that San Felipe figure could be a little faster than it seems?
There's a chance, obviously. I mean, and now in the limited number of dirt races that we run across the country, it's gotten a lot harder to make dirt speed figures. I think the knock on journalism, if there is one, is that he has been in very controlled scenarios pace-wise, right? He was in 2 slow-paced dirt routes where he was close and sort of grinded them down and then pulled clear late because he is built for distance. And then last out, he was in a moderately paced race and he was always close. I think what sort of struck everybody was that he ran Barnes down, and we're all sort of led to believe these Bob Baffert horses can leap tall buildings in a single bound. And so the fact that he did that sort of garnered a lot more attention than it would have if he had run down, insert X horse from different barn. So it was like, okay, if he can run down Barnes when Barnes is on a pretty easy lead on a track that, is always generally conducive to front running types, then he's very good. The concern to me would be, and you can't simulate it here, is what happens when journalism has 12 horses in front of him. He's getting dirt kicked in his face, and he has a jockey with little to no Derby experience. Again, little to no Derby experience is not usually a big worry. Rispoli is an internationally renowned jockey, but that's the worry. That's something that we'll really have as a concern, I would say, on Monday and moving forward from there. Not so much now. In here, it's a situation where his finishing position is going to directly correlate to how Bob Baffert schemes up this race. Mm-hmm. Because if he decides that one of either Citizen Bull, by the way, is in pretty much the same scenario as him. He does not need to go all out to win this race. And you wonder to an extent, a friend of mine mentioned this to me, maybe they're supposed to try and rate Citizen Bull and see if that works. And, knowing that Barnes' best opportunity is going to be to just book it on the front end, put Citizen Bull in a stalking spot and see if he's as effective. That will really go a long way towards determining what happens in this race. Because Citizen Bull, God love him, he has been able to just set one slow pace after another. So we've seen what he can do when he sets a slow pace. Guess what? He ain't setting a slow pace in Louisville.
That's true. I was listening to the Steve Big Show this week, and he had a segment with Andy Serling on there, and they were mentioning that also about maybe this is the time to rate Citizen Bull in this race because you know what he can do up close, and you have Barnes in this race. So that would be an interesting, different tactic, I think. And, the one time Citizen Bull was off the pace there in that Del Mar Futurity, I personally didn't think he got a very good ride in that race. And since then, he's been dominant. I probably have a better opinion of Citizen Bull, at least a more favorable one than most people. It seems like everyone that talks about him says, oh, he's had easy paces. He's had easy leads. But he just continues to win. And that's my thought with him. I'd be curious to see, can he sit off a little bit and still kick there? Because then if he does that and he does win this race, then all of a sudden he's the Derby favorite.
Right. And I'll throw another scenario out there for you. And look, one thing I want to say about what you just said is that you can be opportunistic and good. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. And I think Citizen Bull is a little opportunistic, but he's still good. And you get yourself into those good scenarios, you still have to deliver. And he has delivered so far. John Sheriff's entered Westwood in this race, who's also owned by the same people that owns Baeza. I'm not necessarily sure if he's in there just to fill the field. What if the plan is to send him to the lead and try and get close to Barnes or Citizen Bull early? I don't think that's the most inconceivable scenario. I don't really think Baeza wants to come from all that far off the pace either. But, that's something that can happen. I think what we've seen so far in two preps so far, even though journalism ran down Barnes, is that these Baffert trainees with speed end up getting soft leads. And I don't think everybody's going to be on board for that this time around.
Yeah, definitely. This is going to be a jockey's race too, for sure. So I think we talked through Citizen Bull there. We know what he's, capable of, and certainly he has a couple grade ones in the hopper. He has points. He's going to be in the gate at Louisville. You mentioned Westwood. What's the tactics going to be with him? What about Barnes? He was all the rage heading into the San Felipe, was 2-5 in that race, got tracked down by journalism. Now shows up here. Is he the one that rates? It's really tough to figure out what Baffert's tactics are going to be here.
Yeah, I mean, boy, it really feels like the bloom's off his rose after getting run down in the San Felipe. But at the same time, he's a horse that got a 105 buyer doing its thing on the front end and just getting worn down late in career start number 3. So it's like, historically, you shouldn't be hard on this kind of horse whatsoever because he ran a fast race. With that said, you start to think like, okay, if he couldn't beat journalism that day, how the hell is he ever going to beat journalism, right? Is he going to have to go even slower on the lead? Is he going to need some big track bias? I think the thing that you can be pretty sure of, and it was Andy who mentioned it to me as well, you mentioned him saying it on Steve Bick's show, I think Barnes ends up on the lead for a variety of reasons, one of which is that if Bob wants this horse in the gate, his best opportunity to win this race is on the front end. And they're going to send him and they're going to try and wire the field because that gives him the best opportunity to win and get into the Derby. It also gives him the best opportunity to run second, which will be enough to get him into the Derby as well. So I think the tactics with him will be pretty clear. I think it was made clear by Baffert how much he liked this horse, that he brought him over to Churchill. Yes, for his grand return to the Churchill family, but also because he likes him. And I don't see really why anything on that regard should have changed. He feels like the horse that sort of lost the most in losing last time out in defeat. But he's going to go from being 2-5 to being the third choice in here. And you'd have to think that from a wagering perspective, that makes him pretty appealing.
Yeah, that was my next question. What's his price here? Given with journalism in the race, with Citizen Bull in the race, he kind of figures to be the third choice. I'm still thinking though that maybe those three are somewhere, around between 8-5 and maybe 5-2 somewhere. I mean, there's only so much money to go around, and then Baeza is going to take a little money. Westwood probably won't take a lick of money in the race, but depending on who you like, I would say Journalism will be favored, Citizen Bull maybe second choice, and you said Barnes the third choice. If you took 2-5 last time, can you take 2-1 here?
Oh yeah, I think so. Maybe look, if you're inclined to bet on those kind of horses to win, but I mean, I would think that it's going to depend on how much the public embraces Citizen Bull. They bet Citizen Bull in that Bob Lewis like he couldn't lose, and he didn't. And they seem to all know that he was going to get a relatively easy lead. So it'll be interesting to see how things shake out early here. That's going to be really the determining factor. But yeah, I would have to think that up to this point, no doubt Barnes ends up third choice in here.
We'll talk about one more horse, and that's the outside one in Baeza. And we mentioned him a little bit. He's out of that very stellar mare, Puka, who's produced the Dornocks of the world, the Mages of the world. So certainly bred to be a good one, has been brought along by sheriffs. That's really not a big secret with him. He takes his time with his horses, broke the maiden last time. Now has to step up into this race. Do you think that maybe that this horse can take on these heavies and get into the Derby, or not quite, maybe a little too much too soon?
Look, with all due respect to the connections here, this is a barn that everybody loves because he trained a few beloved horses. This horse looks like a total outsider to me. I mean, he's the fourth likeliest winner on paper, obviously. This is asking a lot of a lightly raced horse that was handled very easily by Rodriguez 2 starts ago, and then had an awfully soft trip when he ended up breaking his maiden. So fun story. He's obviously a half to both Mage and Dornick, who are Triple Crown race winners of the last 2 years, but I'd be very surprised if this horse is in the exacta.
Well, Twinspires.com has been sponsoring these Derby prep videos, and you got to check out Twinspires contest. Plenty of contests this week leading up to the big weekend. KDBC qualifiers, lots of qualifiers to get in the big $800 Bluegrass KDBC qualifier on Saturday. Twinspires is offering chance to play the grade 1 gamble next weekend. That's a $3,500 Keeneland grade 1 gamble. So plenty of access to these big contests via Twinspires. You want to get in that Kentucky Derby betting challenge. They have Derby tickets as prizes. They have a $250,000 guaranteed prize pool. So go to twinspires.com, check out the tournament tab, and get in on these Twinspires contests during this Derby prep season. Okay, Nick, we've talked about them all. Final thoughts. Who you picking? You on Journalism, or do you think that maybe one of the Bafferts can take him down?
Yeah, I think I'll probably pick Barnes on top to try and get the upset. And of course, my picks for Santa Anita will be available at twinspires.com, an additional plug there for our sponsor. I'm going to try and get a little upset there. I think price-wise, he's going to get the best of it. I think Journalism is the likeliest winner. I'm not a big Citizen Bull guy, but I'm intrigued to see how he runs in here. In what is clearly to me a tougher spot that he's been in since the Breeders' Cup, but a battle-tested horse, no doubt. Fun race where 3 of the 5 are real win candidates.
Absolutely, I am a Citizen Bull fan, and I can't get off now. I've told Pete, just like Ric Flair says, to be the man, you got to beat the man, and I still think he's the man. I know that he's had favorable setups, but he's delivered, and he's beaten the best of the generation so far. I do think that he's been working up a storm. I'd be curious to see what kind of trip he gets. And as far as Journalism goes, he's got that one big figure. But if you look at his prior lines, he's beaten the Getaway Cars and the Ranks of the world. Well, neither one of those horses, I do think, really are as good as a lot of these. So this is going to be a test. We'll see if he can bring it again. And Citizen Bull will be a decent enough price for me that I'm going to stay on him. Well, everyone, check out the other videos on the In the Money YouTube channel. Check out the Santa Anita Derby. Nick, always appreciate your thoughts, and we'll see you for a few more of these videos.
Ready for it, my friend. Looking forward to a big weekend of racing.
It's been a production of In the Money Media. Check out the other videos. We'll see you guys next time.